Good morning, everyone. Let's get everybody in here. Super excited to share with you all today. Welcome to Wellness Wednesday. All right. I always have to hit the accepting of all your AI note takers. There we go. All right. So, welcome to Wellness Wednesday. Super excited that you all are here. I am joined by a very, very, very special guest, Jay Papasan. And if you don't know who Jay is, most of you already do, but Jay Papasan is a best-selling author who serves as the vice president of strategic content for Keller Williams Realty International, the world's largest real estate company. He's also the CEO of the One Thing Training Company, Productive, and co-owner alongside his wife, Wendy, of the Papasan Property Group with Keller Williams Realty in Austin, Texas. Jay, I know your time's valuable. Thank you for being here today.
Thanks for inviting me. I'm looking forward to this. Have we taught a
Good.
class before?
Well, we've definitely done some training, but most of that has been with the One Thing coaches. You and I have
Yeah.
kind of taught our One Thing coaches. So yes, a little bit, but not like this. So I'm excited for this though. If you're here, you know that the topic that we're covering today is the ultimate success skill. And if you've been attending Wellness Wednesday for the month of September, then you probably already knew that the ultimate success skill is the ability to say no to the things that aren't right for you, thus giving yourself the space to say yes to the things that are. And I've got some questions that I'm going to ask Jay here, and he's going to give us some insight into this ultimate skill. And the first place that I wanted to start, now, obviously, I'm going to plug this book. The One Thing book has been top 5 books that have had the greatest impact on me. And it's something that I share with people often that the philosophy of the One Thing continues to be more and more important as we work ourselves into the digital deluge of distraction that we call work today. But Jay, there's this one section in the book. It's on page 98 and it's titled Unclenched. And I'm curious, what was the thought process behind this section when you and Gary wrote it?
Well, Gary's a little unpredictable, right? Underneath that real estate mogul is a true artist. So I remember when he showed up with that little section written, and I was like, where's this going and why are we writing about it? And I was like, okay, every author drops in little autobiographical bits, but I like that he displays his vulnerability. And those who've spent a lot of time with Gary knows that he has dealt with a lot of health issues over the year. And building a business like Keller Williams, and we all know this in our businesses, creates a lot of stress, right? There's a little bit of the 2 a.m. stare at the ceiling for all of us if you're in the driver's seat for a business. And at a certain point in his history, he was really having some acute health issues. And so he thought of focus as physically clenching his body. And you've seen people like when they focus, their eyebrow gets all furrowed, right? They have that look of intensity. And it took him a little while to get the wisdom to understand that that was just an idea, that focus can happen without the physical consequences. And that realization that there was a truth underneath this facade allowed him to also start saying no to the expectations of others. Like if you look at some of these old reels, they're not like black and white, but like you'll see Gary wearing suspenders, sometimes a bow tie or a tie, pleated pants, right? And he literally was using the playbook. There was a book called Dress for Success that was like a
Mm.
huge hit in the 80s and 90s. I can't remember exactly when it hit, around the time I graduated from high school. And he was running that playbook. I'm a business person. I have to look this way. I have to dress this way. I have to show up this way all the time. And that same time that he just said, I refuse to stress my body unless it's justified, because I've got to play a longer game, is when he started saying no to those expectations. He started wearing blue jeans. He started wearing his trademark black. Black goes with anything. You don't have to think about it. You walk into your closet, and all of that decision energy that goes into an outfit gets saved to make business decisions. And so that was a big moment in his life when he just said, you know what? I'm going to be me, and they will accept me for me, or they won't. Now
Yeah.
he gets to be an eccentric billionaire if he wants to. Like he's already successful, but he did this. People go, oh, Gary can do that because he's Gary. He was doing that long before, right? Gary is Gary because he did that, is the message.
Yeah. And there's so many things that I want to highlight on that. One is when you say that, Jay, what it made me realize, and I'm taking notes with all of you alongside this interview, is Gary got to a point where he stopped pathologically pushing. He quit pathologically pushing and clenching himself, right? And the other thing that I love about listening to Gary's stories, especially about any type of struggle he might have, it could be health. Gary is somebody, and I dropped a reel on this yesterday, in fact, to the Facebook group, that if you want to know a real superpower we can all develop, it's the ability and willingness to study your struggles. Because when you study your struggles, you're able to create your own solutions. And the last thing is I remember him telling the stories about people would come to town and he would have lunch with John on his schedule, and he would bring those people to the cafeteria at the school to have lunch with John. And the people who enjoyed that, he said, seemed to be the right fits for the company. And the ones that kind of scoffed at it or thought, this is what are we doing here? Really weren't the right fit for the company, right? So it seems like he just stepped into being uniquely who he was and let go of that preconceived idea, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I was there when that was happening. You have franchisees fly across the world to spend the day with them, and he's like, today from noon to one, I'm going to have lunch with my son. You're welcome to join me, or you can take a break. Some people were offended, and some people sat in those little tiny cafeteria chairs. If you've ever done that, right? Drinking out of the little milk things and thought, man, I want to be a part of this company. I
Yeah.
love these values on display.
Oh, it's so good. It's so good. So Jay, in today's world, from your own experience or from the experience that you've had with other people, why do you think it is that people struggle so mightily to say no?
Oh gosh, I've taught a lot of classes on this and I've thought a lot about it. And our industry, this audience is predominantly in sales, right? We're in a sales business, a lot of us. And that means a lot of us are more people oriented than task oriented.
Mhm.
So if you go to the back of the book where most people don't make it, and that's okay, but the four thieves, the very first one is the inability to say no. Like if we can only talk about one thing that steals our time, steals our productivity, it's the inability to say no.
Mhm.
And for people that kind of lean towards people orientation versus task, like I'm kind of task oriented. I think so are you. So like I don't
Yep.
struggle with no so much,
Right.
but I know a lot of people who do. So I think the first foremost is we're afraid of disappointing people, of letting them down. We want to be useful. We're in a service industry. We want to serve. And so our instinct, how we got here, was probably by saying yes to a lot of those and
Mhm.
demonstrating how good we are. And I think we overestimate how disappointed people will be when we cancel on them or when we
Mhm.
say no up front. That's number one. And like if we want to unpack that, or I can just throw like three or four more at you.
Well, I think that unpacking that is really important. And, I don't want to speak for you, Jay, but I'm pretty sure that you and I are more of the JOMO crowd. We get the joy of missing out versus the FOMO. I don't know that I've ever had FOMO in my entire life. And so, yes, I think you're right that
You
the two
have
of us
watching a Kansas City football game and wishing you were there. That's about it.
okay, fair enough. You know me well. You know me well. And yet that disappointing people I think is really true. And one of the things that I share with people, especially as they continue to build a company, is you are going to disappoint people. There is no way around it. If you're going to live a life by design, a life of intention, a life of purpose, then you've got to make sure you're disappointing the right people. And one of the reasons I believe people struggle so mightily with that first thief, the inability to say no, is simply that they don't pay attention to who they're saying no to.
Yeah.
Because every yes does create a no, right?
Wendy was teaching a seminar at Family Reunion, and it was a panel of how to balance your work life with your family life. And as a working mom, when she started her career, her first full year, she would not start before 9 a.m. because she was going to drop the kids off, and she would not work past 2 p.m. because she was going to be there to pick them up. That was like the first year after staying home for five to be with the kids. And she put those hard constraints. And I remember we had to get a babysitter on Tuesdays and Thursdays because that's when she would stack all of her listing and buyer appointments. They had to happen outside of that window. And she sold 18 homes her first year.
Mm.
And those constraints didn't hold her back. It actually generated actually a lot more focus for her. And she was sharing this story, and a woman came out of the crowd afterwards, and I was just going to congratulate my wife. And this realtor just said, "Oh, God, I needed to hear that. I just can't say no. It's a real struggle for me." And her husband was with her. And he looked at her and he said, and this just like cuts. He said, I don't think that's true, honey. You say no to your family every day.
Mm. Yeah.
And I'll never forget the look on her face. And I hope that was a moment where she realized who she was actually disappointing.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. Or they, it's an idea that I've been kind of synthesizing in my head, right? That when you take something for granted, you slam the door on gratitude. And it seems like somebody like her, it's really easy to take our people that we think are always going to be there for granted. And so all we're saying right now is just make certain that you're paying attention, right? Who you're saying no to. And I think to Jay's point too about being in a service industry, and in the beginning, yeah, you're probably going to have to say yes to some things that are going to take you out of balance. And yet, anytime that I coach somebody who's in that, second to third, maybe fourth year of production and they're starting to really grow, one of the questions that I'll ask them is, do people hire you for your skill or for your availability? Because if they're hiring you for your availability, you're going to have a real hard time backing out or scaling this company to where you want it to go.
I'll change
Um,
that, Jordan. And not that I'm top grading it, but the way I think of it, are they hiring you for the outcomes you're going to create or your availability or how you're going to do it? And as
yeah,
someone who hates to be
yeah,
managed, especially by someone I call client, right? I mean, if they're my boss, that's one thing. I'm just like, here's the outcome we're going to create together.
yeah,
And do you really want to go in the kitchen and change the way I make the recipe? Because I can create this outcome for you. I can't guarantee it if we keep changing the way we prepare the dish.
yeah,
And
yeah.
you can actually sell your lack of availability as your process if you do it right.
Yeah, that reminds me of that old story, Jay, of the warehouse that shuts down and the manager's freaking out and he calls the warehouse technician guy, that company, and he comes out, he looks around, he opens up this one door, takes out his screwdriver, turns this screw a quarter turn, and the whole warehouse turns on. And the manager's like, "Thank you so much. That's so amazing. Thank you. You saved me, blah, blah, blah. How much do I owe you?" And he said, $10,000. And he said, $10,000? You've only been here for 10 minutes. And he goes, "Okay, well, let me itemize this for you. It's $1 for the time and $9,999 for knowing which screw to turn." So it's, yeah, that outcome thinking is something that we as business owners need to always be focused on. What would you say are some creative ways that you've learned or that you've heard other people use as it relates to saying no?
Yeah, I want to hit the why one more time. I was just like, I
Okay.
just that and then we're gonna hold that thought because
Okay.
I wanted to unpack the number one reason first, right? So I also think like when we talk about disappointing people, I cannot tell you how many times I've declined an existing commitment, and instead of disappointment, I get oh, thank goodness, I didn't know how I was gonna make it. I
Mm,
think we forget that they're just as busy as we are, and sometimes giving them an hour back, we've actually given them a gift,
hmm.
right? That they were on the other side of the same conversation. And most of the people here are leading a team, right? Most of you, raise your hands. Do you have a team, small team or otherwise? I can see a few of your faces. I see Ryan. Hi, Ryan. Like, do we have a culture of no on our team? Like, I don't get FOMO. I struggle to say no to my people, right?
Hmm.
They are like, in the terms of who I'm disappointing, the last people I want to disappoint are my family. The second last people I want to disappoint are my work family, right? You
Hmm.
have to figure out where your tiers are. So I struggle there. I want to be there for them. But we also have to build a culture of no. And that starts with us respecting their no's and
Hmm.
teaching them to say no. I had a new
Hmm.
employee that just barely survived a layoff. And for the first month, that she was working, she was so grateful that we found a way to save her in the organization. She would say things like, "Hey, I'm here for you day and night. You can call me on the weekends." And I would publicly, this is culture of no, correct her. I don't normally publicly correct people, but I like, Natalie, I love that. I love that you say this, but I want to tell you that's the wrong answer,
Mm,
right? I will call you on the weekends if the house is on fire, but
mhm.
otherwise, let's try to get our job done between 8 and 5. And if it's truly not happening between 8 and 5, then we need to start saying no to other things to do the priorities, or we need to bring in help, right? We're
Yep.
either doing too many of the wrong things or we don't have enough resources to do the work. But we should be designing our work to fall within our work hours. Now, we're an entrepreneurial business. I know that it spills over, but you can't start by saying you're available 24/7. And
Right.
almost all new agents do. So start with a different conversation. And when we correct our people, we're also more likely to follow our own advice. People are psychologically geared to do the things they tell other people to do. So when you
That's true.
say that publicly, you're helping create it, and you're also more likely to follow that advice.
That's
So I
true.
just wanted to throw that little bomb in before we get into techniques for how to, and also to raise the suspense, right, on how to do it.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And what's interesting is I've actually seen you do this, and because Carly is Jay's right-hand person, and when Carly's on vacation, Jay has even figured out like secret back channels to Slack where he can still communicate with the rest of the team because when she's off, the expectation is that she's off, right? It's so I've seen you practice
You can
this.
schedule Slacks, so I can get it out of my brain, but I can schedule it to show up at 9 a.m. on the Monday that she returns,
Yep. Yep.
right?
I love that.
I know that we
I
have
love
to get stuff out of our heads, but we can schedule that stuff.
that. Yeah. So, what are some tactical or creative ways that you or those around you that you've observed have learned to say no?
I wrote an article about this on the 20 percenter, and one of the techniques is kind of be on a mission. And I didn't unpack it there because I just had a paragraph. But you and I both know we teach people in the one thing business, like in the absence of having a clear, articulated statement of purpose, right? Which is a journey, right? I'll just admit it. Like it's a journey. Like your mission statement, when most people write it, is 50% to 70% BS. There's a kernel of truth in there, but it's not always, it takes time to dial that in. We
Mm-hmm.
teach people to identify their top three core values. And I actually was teaching for the gentleman who kind of taught me this, guy named Stu McLaren. I found out through the grapevine that he was selling his multi-million-dollar business because he'd read our book. And what he realized is that his business was not in alignment with his values. And then I went on a journey. And so I teach people, I do this on my 411. I have impact, family, abundance right at the top. That's my goal sheet. Every time I look at it, which is every single day, I am reminded of my values. And I actually have it when I open up my phone. You can't see it. I've got impact, family, values. So 87 times a day on average, we look at our phones and I get reminded of my values.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm going to say yes to a big commitment, I want it to be a 9 out of 10 on all three. It has to be a 9 out of 10 on my number one, impact. And so that gives me a framework for evaluating something and asking, am I doing this for other people, or can I also do this in service to me? And if it's in line with my values, then we both win. If it's not, then I need to find them a better resource. That's
Mm-hmm.
really not my thing. I could do it, but let me help you find the right resource. So, first off, when you know what you've said yes to, those values, your purpose, your family, your work family, if you're really clear on that, becomes so much easier to say no to the other junk. So, if you only took one technique, figure out what you've said yes to. The story I tell, I got to hang out with, oh gosh, now I'm going to forget his name, 21 Laws of Leaders, John Maxwell.
Mm-hmm.
And he just threw out this statement about some yeses are bigger than others. He goes, when you say I do to your spouse, that yes is default a no to every other human being on the planet in terms of that kind of relationship. So what kind of yeses are we putting out in the world? A yes to our value should be a little bit like a I do. That's a soapbox one. So I'm sorry I went on and on, but that's a big one for me.
I'm sorry. I'm glad that you apologized because if you hadn't, I would have been offended by all the
So
what. Hang on. So the question he just asked though is pure gold. What kind of yeses are you putting into the world? That's a thinking time question for me. So Jay, on values, this is a big topic with you, right? And also Madison, I think is going to find you that article that he wrote on the. It was in November, right? The 11 ways to say no. So
if
she'll
you
drop
Google
that.
11 ways to, there it is. Thank you, Madison.
There we go. And Jay won't plug himself, so I'll do it for him. If you're not in the 20 percenter, you should definitely join it. It's so good. And it comes out every Friday. They're very short reads. But values is obviously something that's very important. If someone in the audience, that idea of values is new to them, Jay, can you just quickly explain or define what a value is?
Sure. A value is something that you hold dear,
Mhm.
right? For me, like the thing that is a driving force for me is impact. Like I've looked and looked at the decisions I've made that I've been happy about and the decisions I've made that I've been disappointed that I chose to do it. And I'll look at whether it was driving impact, whether it was bringing me closer or farther away to my family, whether it was creating abundance for myself and others or not.
Mhm.
Right? I don't like playing zero sum games. So, like abundance becomes a measure. If I win, do other people lose? Right? That's
Mhm.
part of my scorecard. I've just figured out that those things matter to me. But what matters to you can be completely different. Like our head of ops on our team, her number one core value is competence. Pretty good for an ops person, right? They
Yep.
want to be good at what they do. And
Yeah.
I have to remember that as her leader to think about, do I give her permission today? Like our mantra right now, we've been in triage mode on a couple of fronts is, right? Done is good and good is great. And I just keep saying it. Done is good and good is great. Done is good and good is great. So stop defining great around what you could do if you had all day to do the task. But right now, done is good. And we're going to say good is great right now. And we can
Yeah.
change that criteria when we have more time and resources. So values are very personal. We've got a deck you can get, but you can also download a values chart. There's like psychological values. You look that up and they'll find all kinds of exercises. The goal is to identify your top three by process of elimination, put them somewhere you see them every day, and then start practicing making decisions with them. The only rule on coming up with your core values is they have to be for you. I encourage people sometimes not to share them, not to post them until they've lived with them, because that prevents this idea that I'm going to put something out in the world about my values that makes me look good that may not be authentic.
Mhm.
Like I really wanted family to stay number one for me. But the reality was, as I'm becoming an empty nester, like that wasn't the driving thing behind my good decisions anymore. It became, and it moved into the passenger seat.
Yeah, and one of the things that's been I would say, part of the most fulfilling uh, or most fulfilling positions that I've had with you, as far as like the work that we've done and productive. We're releasing a group coaching program in January called the Domino Effect, and when we built that program, I came back and said five values, and we talk about this in My Free Life too. Values is a big piece of that, but when we were talking about values, you said no. I really think it should be three. And I love when we banter about ideas because typically that's like, some great learning and insight comes from that. And yet you're very specific about why it's supposed to be three. And you kind of alluded to this earlier, but will you really highlight to people why it's three?
Sure. So literally, when you talk about aligning things, it means putting a line together, right? They have to fall in a straight line. If
Mhm.
I have one value, I can draw a line through that in literally any direction. Meaning, if I'm just talking about one thing, I could justify that almost any way I want to. If
Mhm.
I have two values, guess what? You can always draw a straight line between 2 points. The first time, so the minimum standard to where now I have to actually move things around to get them to straighten up, they don't regularly fall in a line, is how do I align this commitment with all three?
Mhm.
How do I draw a straight line through all three? So it's mixing up a little bit of geometry with this, like I'm trying to put it into some sort of two-dimensional space for us here. But that's the truth. Like it is very hard to find a big commitment. I'm not talking about which movie to pick on Netflix tonight. I'm talking about what to do, for the next 3 months, like a big commitment. Does this actually align to all three of my values at some level and hopefully at a very high level?
Yep. So, and what he said earlier, and I wrote this down, is practice making decisions with your values. And I'll never forget the first time this showed up in my world is I wanted to get invited into Gary Keller's mastermind as a coach. I didn't want to sneak in. I didn't want any of that. I wanted to be invited. In 2019, I got the invitation. We were at Mega Camp. And I was looking at it and I was like, yes, it finally happened. And I was standing next to Craig Zuber. And then I realized that I would miss the first day of school for my kids because the first day of school always falls during mega camp, and I always have to rush out of there. Because many of you know, if you follow me on Facebook, we take pictures every year, same place on the first day of school. And I said to Craig Zuber, I said, man, this is at the same time when I would have to leave to make it to the first day of school. And he just looked at me and he said, well, it's a good thing your values are clear.
Yeah.
And I just
Right.
knew in that instant, I have to go, right? So practice making decisions with it. That's so, so important. So,
Let me give out two. I know we're going to have to be short on time, and people like I just say like the top two other ways to say no are number one, delay. You heard me say
mhm,
it earlier.
mhm,
Delay or escalate the commitment. Someone asks you to do something, and all you have to do, so the easy script is, you know what? Can you pop me an email with those details so I can take a hard look at it? And then I'll be able to reply back very promptly.
mhm.
Tiny escalation. It's very easy to just ask someone on the fly. It's an extra step to actually have to put your thoughts on an email and ask it again. You would be so thrilled to know how few people will take that extra step. And if it isn't even worth writing an email to you, do you think it matters to them if you say no?
Right,
I've had
right.
people like, I will escalate. Great. I will be happy to talk to you, but will you read this book first? Because that will inform our conversation. People are always asking me for publishing advice. I created an hour-long training video. If you will watch this, circle back, and then say, I still need time, I will be happy to fit you on my calendar. Only 1 in 7 ever circles back. I would like to think that the video did the job. So escalate commitment, delay the decision. I have a script. I write no social on anything in my DMs, on my text messages when someone asks me to make a commitment. And it just populates. Just like when you do TY and it says thank you, I type no social and it says, wow, thanks so much for the invitation, something along these lines. I'm really trying not to make commitments on DMs and on text threads. Would you please email this to me at this address? And then I can sit down with my EA, Carly, and we can look at my calendar and find out when we could say yes to this or not. Thank you so much. It takes 2 seconds to type no social, and I've delayed it. And again, escalated the commitment. And then I get to sit down and say, I have all these podcast requests. Carly, I'm going to give them to you, and you can fit them in and say yes at the appropriate time. But those two things, escalate and delay, will buy you time to actually make a decision on your values.
That's true. And the other thing is that when you bring in that third party, if you have an excellent operations person, we did this week. I had a region reach out to me, asked me to come speak. I wanted to do that. I used exactly what he's saying. I don't make commitments before I talk to Laura Wassinger. She's the person that handles all things calendar. We brought it back. She said, you can't do it. Then she emailed him and said, I'm so sorry, Jordan's not able to make it. And so then the reply, oh, if they are continuing to try to sell us on the idea, that goes to her. It's never going to come back to me. And it just, for those of us that are enablers and want to help other people, it's so awesome to delay and have those key people in your life that can say no for you.
Yeah.
Uh, well, Jay, I would be remiss not to let everyone know that if you're really intending to get your values nailed, then one thing that's coming up, and Jay didn't know I was going to say this, is the goal setting retreat in Austin, Texas in November. We're going to drop the link to that. You've got two options, either live stream or in person. If you've never attended this, oh my gosh, absolutely do yourself the favor. This is the last goal setting retreat as we know it. Next year, it's going to pivot into something else. And yet, if you love this discussion around values, if you're looking for a workshop that you can pull this information out of you, this yes to say, or no to say yes to the things that you want, check out the goal setting retreat. It's amazing. Jay, thank you for the time. Thank you for the energy and effort that you poured into all of us today. I know we're all better for it.
Thanks for having me, and thanks everybody for showing up early on a Wednesday morning.
All right, everybody. Just so you know, next week we have Jordan Davis and I will be back here, and we're going to be talking about the 3 steps to raising your standards. You will always get your standards. You don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your standards. So make sure that you put Wellness Wednesday on your calendar next week, same day and same time, 9 Central. Bring a friend, bring a spouse. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for being a part of our community, and we will see you next week. Bye bye.